Hi, I'm Ginny Robinson, and I'm a modern quilter and designer, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to combine applique and patchwork. The first thing you're going to want to do is create an applique shape that is exactly the same size as the quilt block that you're going to be mounting it to. So as you can see here, I've got my template for this X shape, and this is a sew-in interfacing that I'll be using. So I just take the template piece, and I make sure that it's aligned perfectly with the corners. Then I'm going to carefully trace. I like to use cardstock for this. I get a lot of use out of just one template, and I take a lot of care. If your hand wiggles a little bit, it's okay. You can always correct for that when you cut. Okay. So you're just going to continue to trace until you've done the whole thing. And I've got one here. A tip I have is to go ahead and staple multiple layers of the interfacing. That way, with just one cut, you can get up to 4, sometimes 6 pieces. So get a pair of scissors that you like. And this is a place where I really like to take my time, sit down. Sometimes I'll just rest my hand on the table, but you don't have to. One thing to make sure of is that this point is nice and crisp. Okay. One thing you do want to be sure of if you're using a sew-in interfacing is that your cut is nice and smooth. It's okay if the line that you drew wasn't, but you want that cut to be nice and smooth because that's the exact shape that your finished piece is going to be. So after that, you'll have probably a stack of shapes that you can use. Then what you're going to do is glue baste the sew-in interfacing to the color that you want your X to be. So again, this is the same size and shape as the background quilt block. But you're going to glue baste this down. And it's really preference. You can either glue on the interfacing or glue on the fabric. I've learned it doesn't much matter. I like to do arrow shapes for this. It holds the corners down really nicely. Okay. You don't need to go crazy on the glue. You just need it to be there for a bit. And then you're going to come back, get your scissors again, and you're going to cut a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 inch is a little much, but you don't want to cut it so thin that you can't turn it under. Yes, sharp scissors are very important. You want a nice smooth cut. You don't want a lot of fraying. And a good pair of scissors really helps you do that. When you get to the corner, you're going to snip almost to that corner. I like to save like 1 or 2 little threads. It just helps keep it from fraying. We're going to cut one more side. And again, staying close to 1/4 inch, but a little bit less, a very scant 1/4 inch. Get right to that corner, come around to the other side. Got a couple of threads hanging on there, so I'm going to take care of those. And then again, cutting almost to the corner of the interfacing. The next thing you're going to want to do is use glue to turn under the fabric to what ends up being the back of the interfacing. So here, again, with the X shape up, you're going to take a thin line of glue, school glue is fine for mounting the shape onto the fabric, but I really like to use quilter's glue for this part. It's really tacky and it allows you to get a nice turn. It grabs onto the fabric really well. And I just use my finger. I know a lot of applique quilters use tools for this part, but I find that it's just as easy for me to use my finger as it is anything. If glue gets on your fabric here, it doesn't matter, it's all getting turned to the same place. Okay. So I have another one here that's almost finished. I've got a couple more lines to go, so we'll just finish this up. This is another place really just to take your time. If you kind of go beyond something with the glue, that's okay. But what you really want to take your time with is turning that fabric under so that you get a nice smooth line that looks exactly like the interfacing underneath it. The glue's pretty wide there, but again, it doesn't matter. If you have some hanging out, it's okay, because what you end up doing is glue basting this shape. You do not do the ends. You can leave these open because these are actually what's going to be sort of like the patchwork portion of the block. They end up sewn into the seams, so you do not need to include fabric that spills out and needs to be turned under there. That gets sewn into the seam, so you can just leave it open. The next thing, I'm going to bring my school glue back. Going to make my arrows again. This time I really do like to put my glue directly on the applique shape and not on the background. It's easy. And then you're going to carefully place your applique shape in the corners, just like that. School glue is really forgiving. If you mess up, you just lift it. It's fine, it washes away. So, all right, and now we're ready to sew. So today we're going to be using quilting piecing thread in a purple color just to make it easy for you to see. I often use invisible monofilament thread or a thread that matches the applique shape, not the background. And here we're going to use a really small zigzag stitch. It's about 1.2 by 1.2. That's a really small stitch, but it's going to give you a really nice finished look. You're going to want one of your zigzags to go into the background fabric and one of the zigzags to go into the applique shape. And you definitely want to go slowly. I recommend when you get to a corner that you stop with the needle down and pivot. Go slowly here. Okay. There we go. Corner is sometimes the hard part. There we go. Okay, so we'll take this back to the table and I'll show you what I've got. Okay, so we have our finished blocks, and what you're going to do to piece these together is sew a regular 1/4 inch seam, and all you're going to want to make sure of is that your applique pieces are aligned with each other when you sew. If you want to use a binder clip or a pin to hold these in place, you can. Then you sew your seam and you're done. Let's take a look at what you can create when you use modern applique and patchwork together. So as you can see, this kind of look creates a lot of really interesting secondary shapes, and it's really not that hard to do. It's just that easy.